Thank you for listening to the weekly sermon podcast from Piney Grove Baptist Church in Trenton, Georgia. Piney Grove is a church that is being renewed by faith that lives, love that works, and hope that endures. Our hope is that your heart will be renewed today. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming content.
Psalm 23. Let's jump into it. How many of y'all been reading the book? Raise your hand. Good deal. It's good, isn't it? It's very good. It's so good, so encouraging. I've read it probably a couple times in the past. I read it again less than a month ago, and now I'm rereading it again as I'm studying. So just reminded of how good it is. A lot of underlining, a lot of notes that I'm writing in it myself. I hope that it's an encouragement to you also. Okay, Psalm 23, verse 2. Tonight we're going to talk about the second part, and it's kind of a transition, and I think it'll make sense as we go into it. I think if we condense verse 1 of Psalm 23, if we condensed it down into one thought, just one idea, I think that it would be David introducing us to a personal relationship with God, his personal relationship with God, if you just want to boil it down to that. And it's really important to note, because we have a tendency to think of the God in the Old Testament as being distant, maybe demanding, cold-hearted, whatever you want to call it. And what David does in verse 1 is he introduces God in a groundbreaking way. Now, keep in mind, we talked about this last week. David uses the name Yahweh when he's calling God by name. And as we considered that, we thought about that. This was a name that was very, very revered by Israel, to the point that some would not speak it or write it. Yet that's the name that David uses to introduce us to God and to his personal relationship with God, which I find intriguing. And because of that, what we did is we went back to Exodus 3 to see how it is God who actually introduced himself to Israel that way. So God is the one who said, "Here is who I am." And he says, "My name is I am that I am, and that will be my name forever." And so it's really interesting to think, well, why didn't David use a different name? Why didn't he use the name Elohim or Jehovah, something else besides that? It's just interesting to think about. So God is holy. We know that. And he's so holy that we cannot stand in his presence and live. However, God is so kind and loving and merciful and gracious that he makes a way for us to know him and to be near him. And I think it's for this purpose of foreshadowing truth. Think about this, a foreshadowing truth that David introduces us to God as his shepherd. Now remember, David's writing Psalm 23, but we believe, based on passages of Scripture, like 2 Timothy 3 and like 1 Peter 1, I think it is, and other passages as well, that although David is writing the Scripture, he's being inspired by the Holy Spirit to write it. So God is directing in his writing. So God, knowing that one day his son Jesus would build upon this same terminology, he gives us a glimpse into the future through David. So when Jesus uses the term shepherd, he introduces himself as the good shepherd that saves, that provides and defends and delivers his sheep. We looked into that last week in John chapter 10. So David is giving us a look into the future, and God is using him to do that. So as we move from verse 1 to verse 2, David begins to describe the treatment he experiences as a result of his relationship with God. How is God treating him? What does his relationship look like? Okay? I mean, this is key to understanding why he would refer to the Lord as his shepherd. If it is a relationship, then there will be examples from which to pull to explain it to others. Here's what my relationship with God is like. And he calls him the shepherd, and then he begins to understand and unpack it and help us understand it. So let's notice how David begins to explain his relationship to us. Now, if you have your piece of paper, it's on the back, and you can kind of follow along. Okay, first of all, God's intuition. God's intuition. Let's read verse 2, and then we'll break it down kind of phrase by phrase. Verse 1 and 2. We'll read verse 1 and 2. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. So God's intuition, he maketh me to lie down. Think about this. The first thing David highlights, if you want to call it, other than just saying, I have all that I need. The first thing David highlights is rest. Rest. I mean, really? That's the first thing that you want to share with me about your relationship with the shepherd is rest? Yeah. I mean, think about it. God knows and has always known that we need rest. Rest is built into our lives. We are hardwired for it. I mean, the design, think about this. The way God designed day and night are centered on rest. God brings darkness to make us rest. How many of y'all need it really dark to go to sleep? Right? I mean, God thought about this and planned it and designed it. I mean, think about this, though. We don't like rest sometimes. I mean, obviously, when you're thinking of kids, isn't it one of the biggest struggles you have with them is go to bed? Go to bed. And it's what's so funny is when we're saying go to bed, what we're thinking is, I wish I could go to bed. And they don't want to go to bed. And we want to go to bed. And it's like, things change in life, don't they? One of the reasons that we're so tired, though, is because we don't like rest at times. We push our limits, we ignore our boundaries, and we have since Genesis chapter 3. I mean, part of the sin of Adam and Eve was unrest. They were not satisfied with not knowing more, not tasting more, not having more. They were at unrest. They were not satisfied. So what was the result of their choice to not rest in God's wisdom? What did they do? What was the result? Work became harder and less productive. You're going to work harder now and you're going to get less done. Now, it would have been cool to see what work resulted in back then before sin, right? I mean, think about that. It would have been, how cool would this be to go home at the end of the day and let's say Jessica's like, how'd your day go? Went great. Got everything done I needed to do and more. Every day. How'd your day go? Got more done than I thought I was going to get done. I got more done. It's going great. I planted 5 acres. Not that I plant anything. And I got like 10 acres, harvest. I don't know. I mean, because nowadays when you're doing work, it's like you're trying to fight everything back that keeps from killing the thing that you're trying to grow. Right? And he talked about that in the curse too. He said, you're gonna make a living, you're gonna grow food by the sweat of your brow. And thorns and thistles are coming. In other words, the thing that you don't want to grow grows by itself. Right? But the thing that you're intentionally trying to grow is what you have to work at to actually get it to grow while fighting back what you don't want to grow. That's what sin does. So Adam and Eve, unrest, things got harder, and that's a bummer for you and I, obviously. Here's a quote from Tony Evans. He says, God has to make you lie down. He has to put you in a situation you can't get out of. He forces scenarios where every door you try is locked. Everything you fix breaks again. You fall flat on your face. To lie down means you have to get low. God brings us to situations where we have to lie down. We have to stay. We have to rest. So despite our rebellious nature, God makes us rest anyway. And there's a few ways that he does that. First of all, he offers us physical rest. This is a verse that I have memorized because there are nights, I'm sure that you can agree with me about this, where I struggle going to sleep. Anybody else like that? I hate those nights. Especially when it's like the night when you know you need the rest, you got to get up early, and it's like you're trying to just wish you could just go to sleep right away. This verse has helped me. Psalm 4, verse 8. It's a psalm of David. He says, I will both lay me down in peace and sleep. For thou, Lord, only makest me dwell in safety. Isn't that a great verse? Listen to what he says before he even says sleep. I will both lay me down in peace and sleep. Isn't that good? Because he's talking about a condition of the mind, the heart, the spirit, the soul, before he's even talking about the body. For thou, Lord, only makest me to dwell in safety. I can sleep, I can rest, I can be at peace because God doesn't sleep. He's always paying attention and knows what's going on in his control. Number two, he offers rest spiritually. Matthew 11:28 is a great verse to be reminded of the words of Jesus. Come unto me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, I will give you rest. I will give you rest. And we'll talk about a little bit more difference between the differences that God teaches us about rest. I thought this was a good statement, a couple of them that Tony Evans makes in his book. He says, David's first message in this psalm is especially for those of you who are spiritually tired and spiritually drained. Your spiritual resources have ebbed. You've been waiting patiently for God, and he's taking too long. You're spiritually discouraged because you can't find God. Oh, you know he's there. You're too scared not to believe that. But he seems such a long distance off, and a dryness of soul has set in. This is perfect for those of us who are in that season, who are going to go into it or coming out of it. This is a great reminder. Psalm 63, verse 1, another psalm of David. O God, thou art my God. Early will I seek thee. My soul thirsts for thee. My flesh longs for thee in a dry and thirsty land where no water is. There is a spiritual thirst that you and I have, and we talked a little bit about it on Sunday, and we'll do everything we can to fill that void in our lives when Jesus and God is the one who has the ability to do that. And I thought about this, with God putting us in a place where we have to turn to him. It could be that my breaking point and the point of my breakthrough are at the same place. It could be for you as well. Like the point where you're getting to, like, I can't do it anymore. I'm struggling in my life and I've gone as far as I can go and I can't do it anymore. It may very well be that the point of my breakdown or my breaking point and the place of my breakthrough are the same, if I will trust the Lord and turn to him. I made the statement a few months ago. Obviously, it's not original with me, but it talked about how the foundations are shaken in our life, and sometimes we don't even realize that God is the one who's shaking the foundation to make us turn to him. And then, last of all, he offers us rest eternally. Eternally. I was reminded of this as I was thinking through this, and I thought Hebrews has a really good perspective on this. The writer of Hebrews says this as he's talking about rest, and there's too much. You can't. Hebrews is very hard to jump into, so I have to keep it condensed. But he's talking about the idea of rest, and he's mentioning the different kinds of rest that God offers, that God has provided, that God has designed, okay? And he's contrasting them and comparing them. So we're going to jump in at verse 9, Hebrews 4, verse 9. He says this, there remains therefore a rest to the people of God. In other words, the rest of the physical rest, of the Sabbath rest, of those things like that, that's not all the rest that God offers or provides. Verse 10, for he that has entered into his rest, he also has ceased from his own works as God did from his. So when we're at rest, we're no longer trying, we're no longer fighting, battling, there's no more tribulations and trials. It's over. Verse 11, let us labor therefore to enter into that rest, lest any man fall after the same example of unbelief. What rest is he talking about? He's talking about eternal rest. When it's all over, when this life is finished, when I don't have to, you don't have to fight with this flesh anymore, with the world, with the culture, with this body, with sickness and with weakness and with weariness and with temptation, and all of it's over. So think about this. God creates the Sabbath. God creates physical rest. God offers spiritual rest, but he also offers eternal rest so that one day, finally, we are completely at rest in him. That's what he's talking about here. There's another rest that we don't yet get to experience until we go to heaven. So it's encouraging to think about that. God thinks about all the different kinds of rest and provides all of them for us, physically, spiritually, and even eternally. So the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He gives me rest. Man, do we not need to understand that better? Okay, number 2, David's position. He maketh me to lie down. He maketh me to lie down. Is there a more vulnerable position than lying down? Think about it. It's what we do when we stop trying, right? In these moments, we're releasing control of all that we have, and all that we are to God. It doesn't matter how strong you are. It doesn't matter how well trained you are. If you're into self-defense, if you're some kind of warrior, it doesn't matter what weapons we have nearby. When we lie down to sleep, we are the most vulnerable we can be. Yes or no? I mean, we really are. We are giving up, so to speak. It doesn't matter what you have around you. When you're asleep, anybody can take you out. Anybody, anything can take you out. This is the plan that the shepherd has in mind all along. He knows what we need all along, and he's standing guard. He makes me to lie down. He makes me get low. He makes me rely on him. And here's what's amazing about it, as I was thinking about this. Even those who do not know God are relying on him when they go to sleep. Aren't they? Without even realizing it. Because when they check out into sleep, they're totally vulnerable. Completely. Psalm 100, if you want to turn there, it's such a good passage of Scripture. And I would encourage you to get familiar with it, but it's so good and it goes right along with this thought. Make a joyful noise unto the Lord, all ye lands. Serve the Lord with gladness and come before his presence with singing. Know you that the Lord, he is God. It's he that has made us and not we ourselves. We are his people, listen to this, and the sheep of his pasture. Same terminology as he is our shepherd. Enter into his gates with thanksgiving. Gates makes you even think about him using the term gates in John chapter 10 when Jesus introduces himself as the good shepherd. And into his courts with praise. Be thankful unto him and bless his name. For the Lord is good, his mercy is everlasting, and his truth endures to all generations. Turn to Psalm 121. 121, another wonderful psalm that has a different perspective of this idea of resting in God. Psalm 121, I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help comes from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. What is slumber? Sleep. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is thy keeper. Isn't that good? The Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. How close does somebody have to be for their shadow to be over you? The Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. Wonderful psalms to remind us of the same idea. He maketh me to lie down. There's no problem, there's no concern from the perspective of God to make you lie down, to make me lie down, when he is actually telling us clearly he is watching over us. He keeps us safe, secure. He gives us rest. He is on guard always. David's position, he makes me to lie down. Number 3, David's location. Where does he make me lie down? He makes me lie down in green pastures. Green pastures. Well, I mean, when we're thinking about the idea of a shepherd in terminology, obviously with being sheep, obviously, when you go to green pastures, that's a good thing. I mean, it talks about the sustaining provision of God. Like a shepherd, he's as dependable and predictable as his character. That's the way he is. It's in the very nature of God, just like it would be a shepherd, to provide for his children like a father, to provide for his sheep like a good shepherd. This is to me where we need to think about more clearly about God introducing himself to us as a father. If you have children, you understand that you would do anything to help them. You would do anything in your power to help them, whatever situation they face. It's just part of who we are. Now you think about our desire, our innate desire to do whatever we can to help our kids. Now you take that and you place it from the perspective of a holy God who's untainted by sin, who's untainted by greed, selfishness, or any other thing, no arrogance, no pride in him. He's 100% perfect and just. Now you think about that. What must he be like towards us who are his kids? We should never hesitate to understand or to trust that he will provide for everything. So David's location, he makes me lie down in green pastures. And this is what's interesting to me. There's a noticeable pattern in Scripture and in our lives in which we can observe the faithfulness of God. Our placement, our provision, and his providence. Our placement, our provision, and his providence. Hold your place there if you would, and let's go to 1 Kings chapter 17. 1 Kings chapter 17. This came to my mind. It's a well-known story. For if you've grown up in church, a lot of you would know it. Some of you may not know it, but it's a really good story, and it just gives a really good, clear understanding of this idea. 1 Kings 17, and this is about Elijah, and he's going through some, I guess he's in a time of danger, and God is taking care of him, and God's going to reveal himself, how that God is going to take care of him. 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 1. And Elijah the Tishbite, who was an inhabitant of Gilead, said unto Ahab, As the Lord God of Israel liveth, before whom I stand, there shall not be nor rain these years, but according to my word. So he's confronting the wicked king. He says, it's not going to rain until I say it's going to rain. Not because he had the power to do that, but God told him to do that, right? And the word of the Lord came unto him, saying to Elijah, Get thee hence and turn thee eastward and hide thyself by the brook Cherith that is before Jordan. God gives him the place. Here's where I want you to go. Does he tell him all the details? Not until he's going along the way, right? Listen what happens. Verse 4, And it shall be that thou shalt drink of the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed thee there. You got to be kidding me. So I understand the whole brook thing. Okay, that's great. There's water flowing. Wonderful. I got water to drink. But you've commanded who to feed me? Birds. I've commanded birds to feed you. Now, who's usually feeding birds? I mean, we're usually the one feeding the birds, right? And some of y'all may be like all into that. Like you're buying big old bags of bird seed and you got bird feeders. How many of y'all got bird feeders? That's what I thought. You got bird feeders. You're feeding the bird. God said the bird's going to feed him. Isn't that interesting? Look what happens. Verse 5, So he went and did according unto the word of the Lord, for he went and dwelt by the brook Cherith, that is before Jordan. Now, at any point, Elijah could have been like, are you serious? Like birds are going to feed me? Like that's the plan? Verse 6, And the ravens brought him bread. They did what? They brought him bread. Well, think about this, y'all. I mean, it's kind of funny to think about. You ever seen people trying to like eat on the beach with all the seagulls? You ever seen them come snatch things out of people's hands? So is it that far-fetched to think that a raven could get some bread and take it? There's probably somebody that day that was eating lunch, and here comes the ravens and snatched the sandwich, and they just flew it off to Elijah. I'm trying to make it kind of relatable, y'all. But here it is, like literally the bird brings him bread and flesh in the morning. And I'm guessing that means like, I was going to say bacon, but maybe not because he was a Hebrew. But anyway, food, meat and bread and flesh in the evening, and he drank of the brook. So just like God said, he took care of him. He took care of him with the water. He took care of him with the birds coming and bringing him food. And you can keep reading this passage. The brook dries up, but God has other plans for him, sends him to go to this widow lady's house, and God provides for him through the poverty of a widow lady. God taking care of his kids. It's amazing. I'll tell you just one quick story. So in 2008, I had been working in construction, in project management in Atlanta, and how many of y'all remember 2008 was not a good year? Especially in construction, it was not a good year. Of course, it was working that way. It wasn't just 2008, it just crashed in 2008. I think we had a meeting at the headquarters of a company I worked for. I worked for a company that had been local. It was the largest lumber company in the Atlanta area. They had 7 stores, but then it got bought up by Home Depot, and then it took on a different name. But let's just say they had very deep pockets, right? And my understanding is at the end of 2007, when we had our meeting in the beginning of 2008, I think they said they had to write off like $13 or $18 million of debt. because what was going on is the contractors, they could see what was coming. So what they did is they ran their credit out to the max, built as many houses as they could, and filed bankruptcy. And so then the company like ours is left with the bills, right? And like I said, because the company had deep pockets, they were able to survive and go on. Small companies obviously couldn't do that. So there's this really, really weird scenario where things are just, the perception is that things are, going great because people are building and building and building, but the reality is it's about to crash, right? My boss is kind enough to give us a warning, and he says, it doesn't look good for us. You guys might want to get your resume updated because it's not looking good. So I start looking for a job. In the meantime, we start talking about moving back to Chattanooga because Jessica and I met in Chattanooga in the mid-'90s. And so we decide we're going to do it, and I'm looking for a job. And I take, my boss is like, take the company truck, gas card, go to Chattanooga, do whatever you need to do. Don't worry about it. Find you a job, because he knew it was going to be bad. And it was. Everybody that I worked with, the whole division shut down. They laid everybody off. So I could not find a job before we were moving. I had like 2 months. It was an easy time, very relaxing, no stress at all. Jessica was like 8 months pregnant with Reese, no stress, no problems. So right before we moved, the guy that I work with at the company, him and his uncle started a business installing a high-end kind of a touched kind of a hotel locking system that was new out of Europe, and they were installing them in these kind of a higher end resorts. And he's like, "Hey, would you like to help us? The first couple of jobs that we had." I'm like, "Yes," because at that point I was already done and about to move. So here I am, and then actually I did one job before I moved, another job after I got to Chattanooga. Well, I'm still looking for a job, and I got to do those 2 jobs, and I made like $1,500 or $1,800 for 2 days' work, and then like the next time for 2 days' work, I made like I want to say almost $2,000 for like 4 or 5 days of work. It paid well, right? I mean, I was like, this is crazy. I'll keep doing this, So here's what happens. This is no exaggeration. I didn't know this until later. After I did that second job, I finally was able to pick up a job in Ringgold. I check in with my friend that I worked with on those jobs, and he tells me weeks later that those were the only 2 jobs that they ever got. They never had any more. And I got taken care of by the Lord and my family. God knew exactly what I needed to bridge the gap between my job in Atlanta and my job in Chattanooga. God met my needs, met our needs, above and beyond. I mean, that's just one example that just stands out in my mind, how God took care of us. And I know you guys would have some wonderful stories of God's provision. So God takes us to green pastures, David's location. God takes you to the place. He gives you the provision because He is sovereign. His providence is amazing. Number 4, God's direction. He goes on to say, He makes me to lie down in green pastures. Then it says, He leadeth me. He leadeth me. Sheep do not wander into provision and rest, right? They're not out there wandering around and they're like, oh, there's great food. Oh, and here's a wonderful place to sleep with no danger of any animals or enemies or anything. Because we know that sheep have no ability to defend themselves, right? They don't. They're completely dependent upon the shepherd. Sheep cannot wander into that. They have to be led into it. And it's the responsibility, obviously, of the shepherd to know all about the surrounding areas. He's gone before the sheep. He has experience. He knows what's ahead before the sheep arrive. He's going in a direction he already knows about. And it's the same application to you and I in relationship with God. God knows what's ahead of us. He knows where we need to be. He knows the best places and the right places. He knows. I love this verse in Jeremiah 10:23. O Lord, I know that the way of man is not in himself. It is not in man that walketh to direct his steps. We don't know what's best. We can only go with what we think is best for that time, but we don't know what comes next. But God does. Psalm 37:23. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and He delighteth in His way. The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. Proverbs says, the heart of man devises his way, but God directs his steps. God leads us. And boy, do we ever need Him to lead us. So here's a question before we move on. Do you believe God really knows what's ahead of you? Do you really believe that? I'm not saying in a general nuanced way, like, yes, God knows the future, Chris. I understand that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying in a more personal way, do you believe that God really knows what's ahead of you? What you are about to be facing? What comes next for you? Do you really believe that He cares enough to guide you into what's best for you? Do you really believe that? Would He ever abandon you? Would He ever lead you astray? Would He ever be shocked where you end up if you're following Him? Would He ever say, man, I didn't mean that to happen. I'm sorry, my bad. I thought it was green pastures around this corner. Sorry. No. Number 5, David's destination. He leadeth me beside the still waters. Beside the still waters. I mean, think about it. This is so interesting. There's something, I think, really that's hardwired into our souls that responds to water. How many of y'all would say that you can sit and just stare at water like a lake or the ocean? You can just stare at it. A creek? Like it's kind of like mesmerizing. Some people bring it indoors, have like a fish tank, right? Staring at water, listening to water. Some of y'all have noisemakers that sound like water, like rain, a brook, the ocean. Right? Seriously, like I don't know if everybody's this way, but I think a lot of people are in one way or another. It's captivating. It's like built in. I mean, think about this. Even we are anxious and fearful of rough water, except for some people that are really odd and go like surfing it and stuff like that. Not me, but the opposite is also true. When we experience calm water, because the wind has laid down, the wind has died down, we experience peace in our soul and spirit. It's very calming. I mean, isn't it interesting? It makes me wonder if God knows it takes calmness for us to clearly reflect on what is going on around us. It's not until things are at peace around us that we finally take a look inside of us. So he's been showing that picture. Check out this video. Is it up? Oh man, that is so pixelated. Sorry, this is like, there's Lefty, there's Kelly's dad. Okay, so if you could hear the sound, there wouldn't be any sound because it's totally silent. But I'm sorry for the quality, y'all. It's a lot better than that. So why did I video that? Because I couldn't believe how quiet it was. It was completely, and I wanted to make a note of a lake that I just killed at fishing that day too. That was another reason I took that video. But it's just so calming. And the picture that you saw, that you see the reflection, I think maybe that has something to do with it as well. Is it that it gives us perspective that we don't have unless things are calm? Because here's what I know. One of my biggest struggles in my relationship with God is distraction. Because I have so many things that are competing for attention. Have you had that problem before? Does that ever you ever have trouble with that? Maybe first thing in the morning, midday, maybe in the evening. It's like I need to have that undivided attention, that relationship that I need with the Lord where I can focus on Him. But man, I feel like so much of the time that I'm competing, things are competing against that. And it's like the calmness and the peacefulness allows me to reflect accurately. And even in the picture I'm looking at, I'm thinking, I'm not trying to be all like Moana here or anything, but I'm just saying like the reflection in the water gives us perspective we don't have when the water is rough. We don't see it. It's blurry. It's messed up. So here's a question that we have to ask ourselves. Are we resting in God or are we resisting God? Are we resting in God or are we resisting God? Now you think about that. That's a really, really important question. And I think we have to ask ourselves, because here's why. If I am not resting in God, then I am definitely not resting at all. Right? I mean, I'm not. If I am resisting God, then at what point am I resting? There's an author that wrote a book. I listen to his podcast frequently, and he wrote a book called I Didn't See It Coming. And the idea of the book is basically how that cynicism can take hold in our heart because unexpected events happen in our lives, and it leaves us cynical. And how that affects our hearts and just drags us down. But that's kind of the brief overview of what it's about. He makes a statement, though, in terms of just dealing with things and dealing with life and so forth. And he makes a statement, something like this, like more sleep will not solve the problem that the way you're living your life on any given day is causing. So sleep ain't going to solve the issue when the issue is how you spend your day awake. Does that make sense? Like the way I go about my day is what's going to determine how I sleep, not how much I sleep, because it can't make up. He says the same thing about vacation. How you spend your time off is not going to fix the problem that's caused by how you spend your time on. You have to find out what's going on in life that's not allowing you to rest and deal with that before you can really rest. And I think that that's what God is trying to teach us. He alone can really give us rest. Because y'all know as well as I do, there have been plenty of times in my life where I have slept for long hours and I get up and feel like I didn't even sleep. Only God can really give us rest. And that's what that's what David is trying to tell us. He alone gives us rest. He alone can give us provision. He alone can make us and keep us safe when we're in a vulnerable place. So the answer to that question, are we resting in God or are we resisting God? The answer will be determined by trust. If the Lord is our shepherd, the good shepherd, if we have a personal relationship with Him, do we trust Him or not? Think about these questions. Do you trust Him when and where He makes you lie down? When He makes you lie down and where He makes you lie down, do you trust Him? Do you trust the place and the position He has placed you in? Do you trust Him? Do you trust Him enough to lead you into the peaceful places where everything is calm? It may take Him leading you into an unknown place to experience peace and calm. Is that okay? Is that all right? Because sometimes that's where He has to take us for us to actually feel at peace and in calm. Here's a couple of quotes and we're going to be done. For some of us, Tony Evans says, it takes a long time before we're willing to let this process happen. The resisting God, not resting. So God keeps creating situations and allowing scenarios and causing issues we don't like. And He won't get rid of them until you understand that you're totally dependent on Him. So until He gets you to understand you're totally dependent on Him, He keeps taking away those things that you're depending on. And it's not fun. I thought about this another statement he makes on the next page. Sometimes He has to turn our life upside down, and while we're on our back being dragged, it's hard to know whether we're being killed or saved. It's this feeling of being totally out of control. We're not, because He's in control. Sometimes you don't know whether God is delivering you or doing you in. But He has put you in a place where there's room for only one God. And it isn't you. And it isn't me. And that's what He's saying about God. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. And I need it. But the fact is, y'all know as well as I do, sometimes we don't want it. We think we have to do this or that. We don't have a choice in the matter. We wish we could rest, but we can't do that. And we fight against God and we resist God when He's saying, you don't understand that what I'm trying to do for you is exactly what you need. Trust me. It's a powerful thought, isn't it? The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me rest. He makes me lie down in green pastures. Rest, provision. He leads me beside the still waters. Direction, peace. That's what that's what he's using to describe. The first thing, why doesn't he begin with, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want? He wipes out all of my enemies. Right? Because, could he say that and be telling the truth? Absolutely. Absolutely. But he doesn't. He said, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lay down. Lay down. Right there. Green pastures, right there. Lay down. I've never been here before. I have. I kind of know what I'm doing. Lay down there. Let's go. I'm leading you this direction. I don't know anything about this area. It doesn't matter. I do. This is where the still waters are. Just do what I say. If you dig into this more with the terminology and the perspective of the shepherd and sheep and so forth, you'll understand that part of the reason has to do with the sheep being willing to drink water because they're not freaking out because of the loud and noisy water. They need the calmness to be able to trust that they can drink and so forth. And we're the same way. We get freaked out. He knows where to get us to calm down. Wow. It seems so interesting to me that David highlights the rest, the peace, the provision, the calmness that God alone gives and can give. And the question to you and I is, are we resting in that or are we resisting it? Are we resting or are we resisting? So, we're going to sing a song. How about that? Joe's going to come lead us in a song, I think, that goes along with this topic really, really well. So let's do this. Let's stand and sing this song, and then when we're done, I'll come up and we'll have our prayer time, okay? Sing out. Great words. Go right along with Scripture.